All right, everyone get ready, because today we are taking a deep dive into Baptism of Fire by Dr. D.K. Olukoya.
This is a good one.
This is a listener request.
It is.
So somebody out there in the audience is ready to get fired up, I guess.
Definitely are.
I have to admit, even just the title alone had me intrigued.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit nervous, if I'm being honest.
It is an intense title, but that's Dr. Olukoya for you.
Yeah.
He doesn't mince words.
No.
And, he's not just an author. He is really a powerhouse.
Oh, really?
In Nigeria, he founded the Mountain of Fire and Miracles Ministries.
Wow.
So this is a movement that's known for its spiritual warfare.
Okay, so we're dealing with more than just a self-help book here.
Oh, yeah.
This is coming from someone who leads a whole movement.
Absolutely.
What else has he written?
Oh, tons of books. Prayer Rain, dealing with hidden curses, overcoming demonic barriers, you get the idea.
Yeah.
Like all about confronting spiritual obstacles and empowering believers.
So I'm starting to understand why the title Baptism of Fire makes sense.
Yeah.
It's about more than just, feeling good or something. It's about like taking action and maybe even like battling something.
Yeah.
But what exactly is this Baptism of Fire? Am I picturing like actual flames here?
Well, hold on to that image of fire because it really is central to his teaching.
Okay.
He uses fire as this metaphor for God's transforming power in a believer's life. So think purification, burning away impurities.
Right.
But also becoming stronger through the process.
Okay, so like forging a sword, you heat it up and you hammer it.
Yes.
And then you plunge it into cold water and it becomes strong.
That's a great analogy.
Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
You see that idea even in the Bible itself.
Oh, yeah.
Think of Moses encountering the burning bush.
Right. The bush was on fire, but it didn't burn up.
Exactly. And that image perfectly captures the idea of God's presence, being this powerful, intense force. But also refining and not destructive.
Right.
And remember that encounter with the fire was a major turning point for Moses.
It was.
Like, it's what launched him into his calling.
Oh, wow. So is Olukoya saying we all need this kind of burning bush moment? This thing to shake us up and set us on the right path?
He's suggesting that this baptism of fire isn't just a one-time event.
Yeah.
It's like this ongoing process of refinement and empowerment, He sees it as God burning away the chaff in our lives, the things that hinder our spiritual growth. So the valuable wheat can remain.
He's got a point. We all have things we need to let go of.
Right.
What are some of these chaff examples?
He lists things like fear, doubt, sin. Those are the big ones. But he also gets really specific.
Does he?
Talking about things like laziness, gossip, even oversensitivity. Basically anything that distracts us from our relationship with God and keeps us from growing.
Now that you mention it, those things really do drain your energy.
They do.
Like spiritual energy vampires.
He doesn't use that term, but I think he would appreciate that image.
Yeah.
The point is that he believes identifying and dealing with these fire extinguishers is really crucial for anyone who wants to experience the fullness of God's power.
So it's not enough to just avoid the bad stuff.
Right.
We have to like actively stoke the fire too.
You got it. And that leads us to another key concept from the book. The qualities of those who have experienced this baptism of fire.
Ooh, I'm curious about this.
Yeah.
What kind of person emerges from this refining process?
He describes them as having this intense spiritual energy.
Okay, that makes sense.
Which makes sense, given the whole fire metaphor.
Yeah.
But he also talks about their zeal for God, their resistance to spiritual laziness, and their boldness in confronting challenges.
So we're not talking about passive believers here.
Right.
These are people who are actively engaging their faith.
Yeah.
And making things happen. It's not just about believing. It's about doing.
Exactly. And Olukoya illustrates this with some pretty incredible stories.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, one that really stuck with me was about this pregnant woman who encountered a witch doctor who was literally breathing fire.
Wait, breathing fire? Like a dragon?
Well, he doesn't get into the specifics of how it worked.
Okay.
But the point is, this woman had such strong faith that she was able to quench the fire in the name of Jesus.
She faced down a literal manifestation of evil?
She did.
And walked away victorious.
Yes.
That's intense.
It is.
And inspiring makes you wonder what kind of courage we could tap into
if
we really embrace this whole baptism of fire concept.
That's exactly the kind of question that Olukoya wants us to wrestle with. It's not just a theoretical concept.
Right.
It's about how we live our lives every single day.
So we've got the fire, we've got the refining process, we've got the qualities of those who've been through it.
Right.
But I have a feeling there's more to this, right?
There is.
Olukoya doesn't just leave us hanging
No.
with a nice picture of spiritual strength.
You're right. There's a whole other layer to this baptism of fire we need to unpack.
Right.
And it involves those fire extinguishers that we talked about earlier.
I have a feeling this is where things get even more challenging.
Well, let's just say he doesn't sugarcoat the dangers of letting those fire extinguishers take over. Yeah. He really wants us to understand what's at stake.
Okay.
You know?
Okay, so we know that these fire extinguishers are bad, right? They quench the very power we're trying to cultivate.
Right.
But I'm guessing it's not as simple as just, like avoiding temptation.
It's definitely more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Olukoya argues that these extinguishers can be both like internal and external forces.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Working against us.
So we've got our own weaknesses, but then there are also outside influences.
Right.
Trying to pull us down.
Yeah.
What kind of external fire extinguishers does he talk about?
Well, he talks about negative spiritual influences.
Okay.
Things like demonic attacks or curses.
Right.
But he also emphasizes the impact of our environment.
Okay.
And the people we surround ourselves with.
Okay.
So if you're constantly surrounded by negativity.
Right.
Or people who drain your energy.
Yeah.
That's going to have a quenching effect.
So it's like being in a room with like a leaky gas pipe,
Yeah.
Eventually the flame's going to go out.
Exactly.
It makes you realize how important it is to choose your company wisely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But let's not forget about those internal fire extinguishers.
Right.
Those personal weaknesses.
Those chaff elements we were talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Like lust, idolatry, laziness.
Mm-hmm.
Is he saying those things are just as dangerous as like a full-on demonic attack?
He's saying that they can be just as effective.
Wow.
At putting out the fire of God in our lives.
Okay.
Think about it this way. You can have like the biggest, brightest fire in the world.
Yeah.
But if you pour enough water on it,
it's going to go out.
It's going to go out eventually.
Ouch. So even seemingly small things can have a big impact.
Yeah. If we let them build up.
If we let them.
But how do we actually fight these internal fire extinguishers? Do we just try harder?
Effort is definitely part of it.
Okay.
But Olukoya also emphasizes the importance of relying on God's strength and grace.
Okay.
We can't do this on our own.
Right.
He talks about the need for constant prayer, studying the scriptures, surrounding ourselves with a supportive community of believers.
So it's like having a whole fire crew on standby, ready to help you put out any flames that might pop up.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the importance of community in this spiritual battle.
Yeah, we weren't meant to fight this alone.
We weren't.
No.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Olukoya doesn't just talk about putting out the bad stuff.
Right.
He also talks about the need to constantly move higher in the fire.
Yes.
Moving higher. What does that even mean? So there's like a spiritual ladder we're supposed to be climbing or something?
He's talking about spiritual growth.
Okay.
The idea that our relationship with God isn't static.
Right.
It's meant to be like dynamic, constantly evolving and deepening.
Okay.
So moving higher in the fire means getting closer to the source of that heat.
Okay.
Becoming more refined and empowered.
So it's not just about maintaining the fire, it's about intensifying it.
Yeah.
But how do we do that? Is it like turning up the thermostat on our spirituality?
I think he would say it's more like adding more fuel to the fire.
Okay.
He talks about the importance of actively seeking God, deepening our prayer life, and stepping out in faith to do the things he's calling us to do.
That makes sense. The more we engage with God, the stronger that connection becomes.
Absolutely.
It's like any relationship, the more you invest in it, the deeper it gets.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But moving higher in the fire isn't always easy.
Right.
It often involves confronting challenges and stepping out of our comfort zones.
He mentioned a story about a pastor who was finally able to chop down this demonic tree that his predecessor couldn't. Was that an example of moving higher in the fire?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That pastor had to develop his spiritual strength and authority before he could take on that challenge.
Right.
And that's a key point.
Yeah.
Moving higher in the fire isn't about becoming comfortable.
Right.
It's about becoming more capable.
So it's not about avoiding the heat. It's about learning how to handle it.
Yes.
But I have to admit, I still feel a little intimidated by this whole concept.
I understand.
What if I get burned?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And, he acknowledges that this process can be intense. Right. But he also emphasizes that God doesn't give us more than we can handle.
Okay.
He equips us for the journey.
He seems to have an answer for everything.
He does.
But speaking of answers, he does talk about some specific fire extinguishers that we need to watch out for.
Right.
I remember him focusing on discouragement.
Yes.
What's the big deal with that?
He calls discouragement like the #1 weapon of the devil.
Wow.
He sees it as this subtle but incredibly powerful force that can completely derail our spiritual progress.
He even compares it to a disease.
He does.
Really?
And I think that's a really powerful analogy because discouragement can really infect our minds and hearts.
Right.
Making us doubt God's goodness and our own abilities.
It's like a spiritual flu. Saps your energy.
Yeah.
Makes you want to stay in bed and do nothing.
Exactly.
But if it's that serious, how do we fight it?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And one that he addresses directly in the book. He actually provides several practical strategies for combating discouragement. And keeping the fire burning bright.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Yeah.
This is something I think we all struggle with from time to time.
We do.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about the baptism of fire.
Right.
That's this intense refining process.
Yeah.
The fire extinguishers.
Yes.
That can sabotage our progress. And even the need to constantly move higher in the fire.
Right.
But how do we actually put all this into practice?
Well,
it feels a little overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
Like trying to handle a blowtorch without getting burned.
That's a fair point. It's not always easy to translate these concepts into our daily lives.
Yeah.
But Olukoya doesn't leave us hanging.
Okay.
He gives us some concrete steps we can take to walk this fiery path.
Okay. Because I'm ready for some actionable advice.
Yeah.
What's step 1?
Well, he emphasizes the importance of renewing our minds. He argues that we need to shift our thinking from a worldly perspective to a godly perspective.
So it's about changing the way we see things.
Yes.
Like putting on a new pair of glasses. That filters out the negativity.
Right.
And helps us see God's hand at work.
Exactly. It's about intentionally focusing on God's truth.
Okay.
His promises and his power. He also talks about the importance of developing a warrior mentality.
A warrior mentality. Now that sounds intense.
It does.
Is he talking about like actual combat training?
Not in the literal sense.
Okay.
He's talking about developing a spiritual resilience.
Okay.
The ability to withstand attacks, to persevere through trials, and to stand firm in our faith.
Okay.
No matter what comes our way.
So it's about that inner strength.
Yes.
That grit and determination that helps you get back up when you get knocked down.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that this warrior mentality isn't about aggression. It's about courage and confidence in God's power.
Right.
He wants us to be bold in our faith, fearless in the face of opposition, and ready to take on any challenge that comes our way.
I can see how that ties back to the story of the pregnant woman.
Yes.
Facing down that fire-breathing witch doctor.
Right.
She had that warrior spirit.
She did. She's a perfect example.
Yeah.
But he also stresses that developing this warrior mentality takes discipline.
Right.
He talks about the importance of regular prayer. Fasting, studying the scriptures. Those are the spiritual exercises that build up our strength and endurance.
It's like going to the gym for your soul.
Yes.
You have to put in the work to see results.
You do.
But it's not all about battling and fighting, right?
Right.
There's got to be like a more peaceful side to this whole baptism of fire thing.
You're right. It's not just about fighting external battles. It's also about cultivating that inner peace.
Okay.
He talks about the importance of learning to rest in God's presence.
Right.
To find that stillness amidst the storms of life.
That's something I think a lot of us struggle with.
We do.
We're so busy fighting fires
that
we forget to just be still.
Yeah.
And listen to God's voice.
He calls it entering into the secret place of the Most High. It's about finding that intimate connection with God.
Right.
Where we can draw strength, receive guidance, and experience his peace.
So it's like having a secret weapon.
Yeah.
A hidden source of power that we can tap into whenever we need it.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And this leads us to another crucial aspect of his teaching.
Yeah.
The importance of walking in obedience.
Okay.
He argues that true spiritual power comes from aligning our lives with God's will.
So it's not just about knowing the right things.
Right.
It's about doing them.
Exactly. And that can be tough.
Yeah.
It requires humility, surrender,
right,
and a willingness to step out in faith.
Yeah.
Even when we don't fully understand.
It's like jumping off a cliff and trusting that God will provide the parachute.
That's a vivid image.
Yeah.
And it highlights the risk involved in walking in obedience.
Yeah.
But he reminds us that God is faithful.
Okay.
And he will never lead us astray.
So we've got to be bold, disciplined, and obedient.
Yeah.
Sounds like a pretty tall order.
It is.
But I can see how these qualities, combined with the fire of God's presence, could really empower us to live extraordinary lives.
That's exactly his point. Yeah. He believes that we all have the potential to be world changers.
Right.
But that potential can only be unlocked through this baptism of fire.
He talks about the need for more Elijahs in the world.
Yes.
People who are so filled with God's power that they can confront evil head on and bring about transformation.
It's a powerful image, isn't it?
It is.
Imagine if each of us tapped into that level.
Wow.
Spiritual authority and boldness.
That's a thought. Makes you want to reevaluate your whole life and say, am I living up to my full potential?
That's a great question to ponder.
It is.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what if you were called to be one of those Elijahs? What would you do differently?
Wow.
How would you prepare yourself for that level of responsibility and power?
Those are some serious questions.
They are.
I think this deep dive has given us a lot to think about.
It has.
It's not just about reading a book.
Right.
It's about embracing a whole new way of living.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this fiery journey.
It's been great.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Pages to Dialogues. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and found valuable insights to apply to your life. If you did, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, Pages to Dialogues, for more thought-provoking dialogues on Christian books. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback on this episode. Please leave a comment below and let's continue the conversation. If you know someone who would benefit from our discussions, please share this episode with them. Your support means the world to us. Finally, if you appreciated this episode, please give us a thumbs up and a like. It helps us reach more people and continue creating content that inspires and uplifts. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to engaging with you on our next episode of Pages to Dialogues.